and our roots are here in the Central Asian mountains with the young and modest and hardworking people of this region.
Family of doctors.
Yeah, so I'm also married a doctor. So
Yeah.
2 gangs in our class. So a leader of one gang, and there was a guy who was a leader of another gang, and you know.
And you had fights.
Yeah, and we had fights.
I think not a lot of people know that.
Came and said, Abdullo, trust us, we can write this system on our own.
I thought you would say flying. So, the third guest, or the first one, is Abdullo. Abdullo, as all of you know, he's the visionary and the leader behind Alif. He's also a good friend of mine. We met actually in London. I was quite inspired by him because in my mind I remember that Abdullo graduated the best university in Turkey. It's Bosphorus, Boğaziçi University. Then he graduated the best university, one of the best ones in the UK, London School of Economics. Then he started his career working in investment banking. And then the bold move started in my mind, because someone who would have this path, basically having good university education, working in investment banking, it's a typical path anyone would have coming to London. But at the same time, Abdullo decided to move to Mongolia, I remember, and we started joking about him, about his bold moves. Then he decided to come to Tajikistan. He worked for Orion Bank. Then he started his own business with Maskan, right? It was the first experience.
It was the second.
Yeah, second. The first one was Somon-TJ. Yeah, Somon-TJ, then Maskan, then Alif. And now you are where you are now. So I would like to start with the story of your childhood. You don't need to tell me the whole story. Maybe the things which you think are significant or which were the life-changing events in your childhood, which you think made who you are now. For example, Firdaus told us that he went into a lot of fights back in the school, and that probably made him who he is, and the qualities he has now come from there.
The life-changing events.
In your childhood, I know, first fight.
The first fight, oh man, the first fight, good. Well, I was lucky. My mother took me to wrestling classes very early on, and that gave me a lot of boldness, I guess. So I would, if someone dared me to a fight, regardless of their age, I would take the fight. And the fights I remember are the fights where I was knocked down and so on, because. But that was the times, right? The early 90s.
You were the leader in the class?
I wasn't the the funny thing is that I wasn't any kind of a educational leader or moral leader, but I was more like there were 2 gangs in our class. So I was a leader of one gang, and there was a guy who was a leader of another gang, and
and you had fights.
Yeah, and we had fights. Yeah, that's I think something common for a lot of us for our early days. Important things, life-changing things. I guess that whole experience was I moved to Khojan with my sister, and
when the war started.
Well. Yeah, when the war started, and I didn't study really well. So I remember my grandmother was the school's principal, and one of the images in my memory is being scolded by her for not studying well. Another image I have is from the time I was telling you earlier, time I used to spend in the summers with my uncle. Yeah. So my uncle and my grandmother, they lived together.
In the farm.
We were in the farm. Yeah, we had this extended family, and the summers were usually when I had to do some work in the field, plow the field and do harvest, and that taught me a lot in general. That experience, I remember. Very little things made us very happy, just having a dried piece of bread with green tea and sugar and those things. And he had a very nice library, a very, very nice library where in the heat of the day, just in the middle of the day when people just rested, it was cool in that room, and we would go and pick up books and read. And that was very helpful, because later in the evening my uncle would ask things, random things from nature, from poets, from history. He liked history a lot. Obviously, my parents, they, you know, I remember a lot of things from my childhood with my parents.
How many siblings you have?
We are 3 of us.
3 of you.
I'm the eldest, and then I have a sister and a younger brother. They all went to medicine as well.
Okay, so family of doctors.
Yeah.
It's good, convenient.
Yeah, tell me about it. So I'm also married a doctor, so now everyone is a doctor around.
And your father, I guess, he had quite a career, as far as I know. He led the university at some point, and he's really well-known doctor, well-regarded. What role he played in your life?
He was a very interesting question, because I rarely thought about it. But he was, he wouldn't scold us as often as my mother would. But very rarely he would take me to a corner and have this long discussion about life and philosophy and principles. He's a very patriotic person. He loves Tajikistan, I think, more than anything, and he's very devoted to his work, to his profession, to surgery, and right now teaching as well, like in leading the university. And I think that impacted us a lot. He was, back in the early 2000s, he made a very difficult but successful surgery to a representative of Germany. I think it was either an ambassador or someone, and then that opened the way for medical exchange between Tajikistan and Germany, and he went there, was there for several months, and he could have sort of, I remember some discussions where he was telling me I could have stayed, but it didn't even occur to me. You know, Tajikistan is the place I want to be, and I think that later on, for me, it was obvious that wherever I go, I have to come back and have that love for our country. So, yeah.
You mentioned your grandmother. She's from Khujand.
So yes, my mother is from Khujand, and my grandparents from that side, Khujand as well. My father is from the southern part, close to Dangara, but they lived in Khoron Tepe region for most of the time, now called Bakhtar.
And your wife is from the east.
And my wife is from Badakhshan, so she's from.
So your kids, the perfect mixture of the whole what you call Tajikistan.
They can proudly say that, indeed. Yeah.
Interesting. So what is the main, say, lesson that you learned from your father, and the one that you want to pass to your kids?
I think just the fact that having that love for something bigger, something, you know, and of course the love for humanity is one thing we all have, but at the moment, I think of no better purpose for my life than being helpful to people who, we keep telling that at Alif, no one will come and improve things in Tajikistan. We the youth, we the young generation, we should be proactive, we should help as much as we can, we are lucky to have been born here. If we were born in some other part of the world, I don't know what sort of thing would move us, what would motivate us, what would be the reason for you know, and the purpose for life. Here it's obvious as far as I'm concerned, and I think that was the lesson I think my father imparted on me, and something I hope I can pass on.
You know, when I wrote an article about Alif about a year ago, I think, a lot of questions in the comments were received, and one of the questions was that apparently people perceive your success, Zur Show, Firdaus's success, as success of those who come from privileged background, not those who are average Joes who studied here and started from nothing. How would you comment on that? Would you consider yourself as someone from privileged background?
That's it. Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, I'm privileged to have been able to study at some of the best institutions. I'm privileged to have had the parents that were always supportive, to have had and today to have these amazing people to work with at Alif and do these amazing things. But if by privilege we mean the monetary privilege, the financial privilege, I don't think so, because I remember, you know, again, now, you know, as you bring up these childhood memories, I remember that the days when my fathers would argue whether they should buy a sweater for me, you know, and I remember, you know, the times when things like buying a bag of flour was something that would have become a dinner discussion, right? And my father and my mother, they always worked very hard, and I'm very proud that even today my father does like 3-4 surgeries every morning before he starts his day, and then goes to the university and does his administrative work. And my mother is a diagnostician who still, you know, is helping, like, you know, doing 30, 40 diagnoses a day. And I've not. I think I remember of moments when mostly I was alone at home because my parents were working. I would come back from school and do things on my own back then. So they used to work hard, and they still work hard, and that's great. And financially, I was very lucky, very fortunate to have had a lot of support, but not from my parents.
Did they pay for
my
your
family.
education?
Actually, they didn't pay for my education. No. If we go backwards from the last one, and the most expensive one, my university degree at the London School of Economics was paid by the London School of Economics and Lord Dahrendorf scholarship, which was a scholarship by Deutsche Bank. So, and it was a very big one. It was, I mean, it was hard to comprehend, and it was very, very fortunate thing. It was like $60,000 for 1 year as a
and
grant.
Bosphorus?
And during Bosphorus years, I was receiving scholarships from 3 or 4 institutions. One of them, Nippon Foundation, and that Jakarta as the Nippon Foundation's sort of a subsidiary there, and even today we work with Jakarta. Now, together with Jakarta, we are providing scholarships in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. So every year we choose 5 to 10 people here and there that receive €100 scholarships a month. And those were some good scholarships. I actually used to send money back home instead of receiving money from my parents.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess this clarifies, and I think Firdaus also told us his story, so it's quite evident that a lot of people, I think, try to find excuses why they're not doing things rather than going and doing it. And in that sense, I really think that your path is first of all of someone who is an achiever, because he just goes and does the things. And you did,
too kind.
Yeah, you did a lot of work with Alif. But would you call yourself an entrepreneur? Because in my mind, when we first met with you, and up to the moment when you moved to Tajikistan, you were not an entrepreneur. Because you worked in the salaried environment, so where you had a salary, you always studied. Because I remember while we were having fun, you were always studying. And I didn't see you much because of that, but you gave a good example. But when you came back here, you got more entrepreneurial, I think. Can you tell more about that time? maybe lessons you got here, entrepreneurial lessons? Because I know that the lessons you had in London, they were not that much
lessons,
entrepreneurship lessons, yeah. And I don't know if you agree or not, maybe.
Yeah, I do agree. I studied finance, not much with entrepreneurship. I think when I came back, I started working in the banking sector, and that gave me an opportunity to see how much of how much improvement can be made in the sector. It's huge in size, but at the same time, the service levels were bad. The NPL, the non-performing loans level, were very, very bad. People didn't trust and didn't want to work with banks. 70% of monetary base is outside the banking system, whereas in the UK, for example, only 5% of money is outside the banking sector. And seeing this level of economic unlocking that can be made, inevitably these thoughts came to mind. Okay, we can do something here.
There is an opportunity there.
Yeah, there is an opportunity there, and of course I was discussing this internally within that bank initially, but at that point of time there wasn't any interest to significantly change things. So that probably helped us to start something on our own rather than with the support of some big institution behind. And similarly with the classifieds with Somon.tj, I made a lot of use of Gumtree back in the UK to find a place for rent and so on. And when I came back here, I didn't see anything like that. So we started a project which you don't know. It's called Shaftalu.tj.
Shaftal.
So that was the first one, and it failed completely. But then I was very, very lucky to have found and got to know Jahangir and Dilawar. Dilawar Amon of Jahangir Zabirov, very entrepreneurial, very driven, very hardworking people who are today with Alif. And together we started Farah.tj, then Somon.tj, and those things moved on. So it's the combination of that. It's seeing some
that
things.
That experience basically taught you more about entrepreneurship, because that was the first.
Oh no, I have many failed experiences like that. Yeah. Have you ever read Metropole newspaper?
No.
We didn't issue a single one. But remember, I think I was actually even asking you that question, Azama, what do you think about newspaper stuff?
Probably, yeah.
Maybe, because at one point I thought we should do a newspaper, and
how did you make your first money?
By working. I used to work for construction. Yeah, it was 2004. I was 19. I had a gap year at my studies. I had to take a gap year for financial reasons. And when I came back, I started working at a construction here as an interpreter, translator, and a supervisor of a kind of small team.
Turkish construction project.
It was a U.S. construction project. Actually, it was the construction of the U.S. embassy. So.
Oh, interesting. I think not a lot of people know that.
I used to work at the construction facility. It was interesting times.
Interesting. So, what do you think is the main quality of your character that made you successful?
First of all, I don't think the word successful applies yet. We have a lot of work ahead of us. But
big achiever, say, because you achieved something, right?
But whatever we have today, alhamdulillah, I think first of all it's about the people around us. People I'm so lucky to be with today, and I think it's both element of fortune, but also element of maybe being proactive about finding and being with such people. Firdaus, Zursho, the Dilawar, Jahangir, Sioush, Nuruddin, a lot of people, and I can just count on and on. Today we have 560 people, and every single one of them is just amazing and unique and so inspiring for me. There are some amazing stories I can if we had time, I would have told you about those people.
But there should be one quality which, say, you think that this changed the game here. For example, speaking to Firdaus, I realized that he is the one who stands for confidence in this company, because his main quality is this strength and confidence. And hence he was the first investor who sold his flat and invested in this business. With Zulsho, I think it's more of a talent, because in my head, he, in his way, represents what talent is, because Alif is about talent.
Absolutely.
And what do you think, what puzzle you present by yourself?
It's probably a question that's better answered by maybe Firdaus, Zulsho, or others. I think of myself as maybe someone who's balanced. It's hard to get me upset or angry at something. I think there are just like 3 occasions in my life I've bumped my fist on a table and done something. Other than that, it's hard for me to lose my balance. I don't know how that adds to our thing with Alif. I can't say it's ideas, because I personally think ideas are not that important. If you give a good idea to, as I was telling the other day, to a mediocre team, it would go nowhere. But a mediocre idea with a good team can go for miles. I was good with finance, and I had the background of the sector. That may have helped. But more, to be honest, what I'm really proud of is the thing I mentioned, the first. The team, the people. And maybe to some extent, having known Zulsho, having known Firdaus, and other people who are backing us from day one and today, I just feel privileged to have been able to maybe persuade some of them to join Alif. Maybe that.
What is the weakness that you know of yours?
There are many.
But what is the main one?
Too many to count. But one thing is, I'm not very talkative. So
introverted.
To a certain extent, I enjoy talking to people at Alif. I enjoy talking at home as well. But I also enjoy silence. And I was back at home on Thursday, and we just shared almost an hour of silence with my father. He's also not very talkative, but we're comfortable and enjoy that as well, with just each other's company at silence, and we're both not very talkative. But many to count.
What do you think is the purpose of the life overall? You see, I'm dropping random questions to catch you.
The purpose of life?
Yeah.
I mentioned this earlier about trying to be helpful to others. I've read this book last year, which was very interesting, by Viktor Frankl. It's just about that, the purpose of life, because his whole the man in search of meaning, right? He was someone who had this hardest, probably, what a person can suffer, because he was taken to the Auschwitz camp during the Second World War, and these were obviously, camps where people had to endure various kind of, because he was imagining in his mind that, okay, one day I'll be a teacher of philosophy and psychology, and I'll be telling this story of how I survived. And every moment of suffering started to make sense for him. It became a reason for him to endure and then tell the story, right? So then he established the third Viennian school of psychotherapy, which is focused on therapy by finding purpose in life for people. And that is a question that a lot of people face. Why am I living? What's the purpose of my life? And the answer is probably different for every person. I've come to believe that the purpose of life for us here in Tajikistan is trying to be helpful here, because creating 100 jobs in the UK, in I don't know, in Mongolia wouldn't give as much. Maybe in Mongolia they would, but in the developed world they wouldn't create as much impact. But creating 100 jobs here is so much more meaningful, so much more exciting. And I remember a discussion I had with myself deep at night when I was working at UBS many years ago, and I thought if in the last moments of my life, looking backwards, what do I want to see? If I stay, and there was a discussion I was having from time to time whether to stay in the UK or eventually to come back to Tajikistan. And I was thinking, if I stay and have a nice apartment, nice flat at Knightsbridge, or what are those fancy streets, and you know, I don't know, having financial wealth which you cannot take with yourself, or having come here and having been helpful with whichever way one can. Of course, the latter made more sense to me. That I think is a purpose, as far as, you know, from
to serve
my
people.
angle, to serve people, and that's really the thing that can give you that sustainable happiness. None of other things that, or worldly things that we you know, run after or typically consider as being success is that gives that sustainable happiness and satisfaction with life. But of course, you have to be, you know, you have to have safety and roof over your head, and some basic needs to be covered.
As you know, this year we will be celebrating 10th anniversary of Peshraft officially. We are co-founders in Peshraft, but each interview I'm asking every speaker to give some guidance or vision or tips to those who are about to choose their career or early on. Maybe you can just give few tips or advices you think, shortcuts
to people in life. There are no shortcuts, huh?
No shortcuts.
I get asked that question quite often, and I have this convenient 4 Ps that I usually talk about. It's the purpose, it's the people, it's the principles, and it's the persistence. You know, each one of them can be opened up with an hour-long sort of training or discussion, but definitely surround yourself with good people. That's something you can do. And you are the average of the people who surround you. So to make sure you are surrounded by people who are better than you, but who have the same idea, who have the same principles as you do. And the principles are very important. And you know, the finding and working and being loyal and very strong on your principles, always following them, is important. So at Alif we have these 7 principles that we talk about: the values, integrity, and not being indifferent to each other, helping each other, giving feedback, challenging your leader, challenging every one of us, challenging each other in a good way. A number of things. So principles, very important. And purpose is about finding, you know, there are very few things, as we were talking about earlier, that can sustainably and motivate you over the long run. And finding the purpose in your life is very important. And the last one is persistence, because there's nothing in this world that can replace persistence, as that quote that you and I had read the other day. It's you know, at every major point, we have failed many times. I was telling you about a number of startups and projects that failed. Actually, there are like 10 of them that failed. We have been failing at every instance at Alif. When, for example, at the beginning of the road, we decided that we would buy our core banking system. And that was my failure. And I made the same mistake even twice, not once. Until Zarina and Mustafa and Shorukh came and said, Abdullo, trust us, we can write this system on our own. And gladly, we all did trust them, and they wrote an amazing core banking system, and today we're a fintech company, right? Because after that we wrote our own client relationship management software and processing and payment systems and so on. So it's about being persistent because failures will happen, and how you look at those failures is important. And with all the mistakes that have happened in my life, with all the failures, when I look back, I actually see that they serve the purpose.
So you don't regret any of them?
No, actually, no. I mean, at that time, I had those sad feelings of regret. I shouldn't have made this decision, or I should have made this or that. But now I look that actually it turned out for the best.
If there was a quality you could have acquired, what it would be? Character.
Maybe love for exercise and sports. I do exercise a bit, but it's not something I really enjoy. I have to force myself to do it. I wish I liked it. I wish I enjoyed it, and you know, did a whole hour
I thought
session.
You would say flying.
Flying is good. Flying is. I wish I did. Yeah. I wish
Given your character, I mean, I would think that
many,
you would say flying.
Many things, of course, but yeah.
What do you think is the most valuable quality in people?
Integrity, for sure. Don't even have to think about it. Yeah, integrity is the most important thing. It's the one thing at Alif we don't compromise on. You can make mistakes. We will discuss. We'll give you feedback. You will give us feedback.
Can you translate integrity to Tajiki?
Rost qawli, rost fikri, rost gui, rost budan. Misli Alif rost budan. Integrity.
Because even it's difficult to translate it into Russian. I know that's.
Честность, порядочность. Порядочность.
And another question I have regarding the way you see Alif. Is it a Tajiki company here in Tajikistan? Is it a global business? Where do you want to concentrate yourself?
We definitely are growing internationally. We have now a very strong presence in Uzbekistan, amazing team there, you know, about 50 people. We are going to grow to other countries. Hopefully, we will work on that. And we do see ourselves as a global company. We do see ourselves as a company that will try to contribute to the global fintech ecosystem. And our roots are here in the Central Asian mountains with the young and modest and hardworking people of this region.
Who would you choose as a role model if you analyze the history? Or it can be not history, maybe someone you know.
There are many. For example, like from the personal side, for every Muslim, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a role model. We all want to be like him, to have those values and principles. From the economy side of things, from how, you know, countries can get better, people like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, Deng Xiaoping of China are very, very inspiring. How the economic decisions, the institutions that they built and foresaw have made such a great improvement in people's lives. From business perspective, I really admire Warren Buffett for his, first of all, for his long-term view and his modesty and humility. And despite being one of the smartest investors in the world, he has always this modest demeanor. Yeah. He's lived and he's been driving the same car for like 20 years or something. So very inspiring for me. I like people like Tony Hsieh, who passed away last year. He was head of Zappos, a shoe company. And what I like about it is that he built a culture which is client, customer focused. I mean, people like calling the Zappos and asking for pizza, whereas, you know, Zappos being a shoe company, they would still try to help that person, right? And we're trying to implement the same here. Many people, Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, focus on the people at Starbucks, the employees, and that being the first thing you focus. And if you do your best for the people, they do their best for the clients. And when you take care of the clients, they take care of the company, which then can take care again of the people. And that
Makes
principle is also, I found parallels with what we're trying to do at Alif. So I have huge respect for a lot of people, even in our region. I mean, people like Lomtadze at Kaspi and German Gref at Sberbank, building these very successful ecosystems in finance is very inspiring.
Last question is my favorite one. I ask, imagine yourself fishing and you caught a goldfish. She says that you can have 3 wishes for Tajikistan as a country. What wishes would you ask?
Nice. 3 wishes for Tajikistan as a country. I think first of all, it's education. I think if we concentrated, and I think that there are many efforts, but if we do even further and concentrate on making education a primary focus, as something we invest in most, that would be long-term very, very productive. And the education scape is changing so much. There's so many new technologies, new techniques that can be used. And at Alif, we're trying to do our little contribution through Alif Academy. We have this education platform, an educational technology platform. People can study online. Like at the same time, 500 people or thousands of people can study. At the moment, roughly 300 to 500 people are doing that. Where I teach programming. So that. Second, it's about having a strategic economic priority on technology, on software and software development. I think given we're a landlocked country, exporting something from here, something hardware is very expensive. Probably one of the most expensive places to export something from or to import something to. But software is something that you can, sell anywhere in the world without any major costs associated with that. And if we focus on technology and do a lot of changes that can help us be successful in that, we can gain that competitive advantage if we focus on one thing and do that well. And the third one, for some reason, I'm thinking of tax system. The tax system, right, being one of those things which is constantly something every entrepreneur thinks about. And this one is something in the short run. One thing I was thinking recently is if we can put a short-term goal, it's not a like very 50 years goal, but like a 5-year goal to eliminate cash completely and have everything electronic, all the payments electronic, cashless economy.
Yeah.
So if the economic bloc of our country would say, banks, the central bank, and everyone are now required to make that happen. In 5 years, we get rid of all cash, and we become a cashless economy. And it will mobilize so many things. Of course, it's easy to understand. It's like Kennedy's, we will put a man on the moon by the end of this decade kind of aspiration, where it's easy to understand. But it mobilizes so many parts of the economy that you can get a lot of economic improvement. It will mobilize technology, it will mobilize finance, it will mobilize security, and it will reduce significantly corruption. And as everything becomes transparent, taxation can become less of an issue because you actually don't have to tax everything out of a small pie. You can tax a little bit out of a huge pie because that huge pie is now transparent.
Agree.
So maybe the third one is a bit a shorter termish one with getting rid of cash.
It makes sense. It's a little thing which may have a big impact in the long run. Thank you, Abdullo.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you, Azamat.
Pleasure.
Pleasure's mine.
Thanks.